Today, we're looking at some of the most impressive robots from the FTC DECODE season. I think that's a really slick, really intelligent way of making sure that they're picking up artifacts. I'm Coach Pratt, and I'm teaching robotics and design for over a decade now, and I've mentored FTC teams to winning national championships. A lot has happened over the last few weeks, and today we're going to take a look at how the outtake meta has evolved to allow robots to have some pretty consistent shooting. We'll also analyze how you might do that for your robot. We'll talk about some smarter ways you can design your own drivetrains. Take a look at how the intake meta seems to be splitting between a couple different camps. And then we'll also analyze a new autonomous world record. So first up, let's take a look at how the outtake meta has evolved here. We've got team 23609 Golden Bears. And they've got some pretty impressive throughput going through their robot. So what I want you to take a look at here is the design of all these flywheels. We're going to take a look at about 5 of them here. And they've got a large steel wheel in the middle of what looks like 2 small, large diameter, probably 96 millimeter diameter flywheels. And then they have a steel flywheel in the middle. It's hard to tell what that is. That may be a Go Build a flywheel just based off of its chrome plating, or maybe they've done some of their own work here. Then we've got Team Calamari. I'm not sure what robot name there is, but I'll try to find there in a second. I just want to show you the throughput that they were able to get up through here. Now that is a slow motion video, but we will be able to see just how quickly this thing is able to fire its throughput through. And we can see that it's got quite quick throughput. And if we pause the video here as it pushes itself through, we can see it's probably got 1 steel flywheel, maybe 2 on the edge here. They look like they've got a large, that looks like a 96 millimeter Rhino wheel from Go Builda, and probably a Go Builda plate or something they've made on their own as well. Then next up here, we've got Team Catholic Master Builders 12767. Again, they're just having a little bit of fun, but just showing just how much throughput some of these robots are able to kick out, keep it consistent, as well as with that flywheel. Having a steel flywheel is pretty impressive on your robot to allow it to be able to have a much higher throughput as it's shooting. Same thing here. This is probably one of the most impressive scenes that I've seen of high throughput of a robot being able to punch it right through. And part of the reason that these teams are able to get such high throughput through their flywheel, and this last team here is team 23521, and sorry, I forgot to say, this is team 6272. Part of the reason these teams are able to get such a high throughput through their flywheel is that they have such large steel items on the edge here. Actually, this looks like they may have reused some old Tektronix gears. I've seen some teams using aluminum Tektronix gears as a flywheel point. But effectively what they're doing is they're increasing the inertia of their flywheel so that it's able to hold more of its speed over time. And as you push a ball through, it doesn't actually get affected by that speed so quickly. And the reason why I think this is going to be really important this season is as we're starting to move through these metas, I think that what we're starting to see is that pattern points aren't necessarily winning matches. I have not seen very many matches that have been won or decided by the number of pattern or motif points that teams are able to get. And I think what's far more important this season, and seems to be playing out, is having really high throughput. That doesn't mean you need to ignore the pattern completely, but some teams are getting such high points on this pattern that they're able to get themselves up above in those ranking points just because of higher throughput and having higher shooting and having more build time being able to push through. I think that's really important and really critical to be seeing for teams as we go. Now, obviously, this is a bit of an unrealistic scenario, but I do think that having a higher throughput is really a critical piece here. And I think it really is going to change a lot of these matches. Now, one thing, keep in mind, there's a little caveat on that, is that your ranking points still matter for being able to get into the playoffs. But once you're in the playoffs, I think that teams may end up just sacrificing going for some of those points on the pattern and just going for higher throughput. But when you're in the playoff season, it is or the playoff section, it is still really important to get that ranking point of trying to match those patterns up. But it's going to be up to teams to decide about whether it makes more sense just to have higher throughput, getting more artifacts through the goal than it will be to go for those pattern points. Because the extra pattern points will give you an additional 2 points for each one that goes through. But if you can get another ball through that's classified, that's an additional 3 points in there based off of, and even just random chance, you're probably going to get 4 to 5 of those pattern points as well. So if you can get, let's say, an additional 5 artifacts through without having to index them, you might end up actually coming out ahead in far of points, but not in far of that ranking point, which is going to be able to allow you to get up in those alliance rankings. So do keep that in mind. Next paper, I want to share what happened to a match here. This is Team Golden Horn Junior Robotics, and I want to take a look at this artifact right here as it pops out. They're going to shoot an artifact into the goal here. It's actually going to jump out of the goal, bounce around, and then it hits off their robot, hits that gate, and then that ends up clearing their gate for them. So pretty huge miss on that one in that respect for that team. Now, thankfully, that is their gate, so not a huge deal, but being able to run off that autonomous, I think that that's just a bit of bad luck, and teams are going to have to deal with this. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens when it gets to playoffs and whether something like this happens. It's not considered an arena fault, but I do think that a good chunk of teams are going to feel like they've been robbed on that respect. Next up here, we've got Little Potato Robotics, Team 3592. And I love seeing generational improvements on the robot over time. But one thing that I want you to look at on their robot here is looking at their drivetrain. And you can see they've got a parallel plate design and some sort of custom design they made up themselves. But I think this is a really slick design, particularly because of the edges of it. And we'll see if we can get a better view on one of these edges as it comes across. There we go. And they've got the Go Build as 8mm pattern holes spaced up along the top and bottom of the plate. I think this is a really smart way of going about this, because what I do see a lot of teams doing when they try to design their own parallel plates is that they really don't leave enough space for things to be able to attach on, and it requires you to have your CAD perfect, so to speak, right from the start. But by allowing yourself a lot of these extra plates in that system, it does allow you to be able to add in different pieces where they need to go as you are generating and iterating on your design over time. So that's a really intelligent way of setting up some parallel plates that you may want to consider trying out with your robot. Next up here, I want to talk about some intakes that are going on. And it seems to me like there are two different intake designs that are starting to make a bit of a shift here. You've got, well, three realistically. You've got the rubber band wheel intake that is quite successful. I've seen teams be useful on that. We're also seeing a sort of little bit of compliance. I've got a couple of videos tutorials on how you might make an intake similar to this, but it's got a little bit of compliance up at the top, and that it's able to lift itself up and over on this robot. So this looks like it's 23532 as a robot. And I really like having an intake that has a little bit of compliance lifting itself up. I don't like just using gravity to be able to hold this back down, because in my experience as a robot is driving around, it's simply not heavy enough. And you may want to add a little bit of rubber bands constraining this down. But it is surprising how effective a short intake can be with some ramps on the edges that are able to push a ball in. Especially if you're going to run into a wall, this does make life a lot easier to pick a ball up or an artifact up, and is quite successful at being able to pick these up and move these around. So that is one sort of meta that's starting to develop. Another one is similar to this Team Falcon here, or Falcons, which is Team 19589. We've looked at the Falcons robot before, but now we can get a bit more up and close look at their intake here. And you've seen this on Theosys. You've seen this on a couple other robots. They have these vectored wheels on two sides with some compliant wheels in the middle, and then a flat bar across the top. I believe that Seattle Solvers has something similar to this as well. For starting this up, you've got a flat bar here, and the idea is that the vectored wheels are supposed to hit against this flat portion and then slide it over and in. And this is another really successful intake that I've seen from some teams. Now, I wouldn't say that one of these intakes is necessarily better than the other, at least as far as I've been seeing them perform. It depends on where your team is going. And to be honest, I think that both have shown them to be pretty successful intakes up at this point. I am curious if using a flat wall or having a little bit of a ramp might help this a little bit more, but it does seem that teams that are using these vector wheels have gone to a flat wheel system. I'm not 100% sure if that is based off whether they have decided on a ramp and it hasn't been successful, or whether a flat wheel has been more successful for them. Next paper, we're going to take a look at some basing here. We've got 25310, And we have seen something like this before in the past using linear rails. However, I think this is a really slick way of getting their linear rails up and lifting their robots up and above. And I do think that having some sort of lifting mechanism is going to be a way that I see most teams being more likely to be able to get that 2 robots on a single base parking, particularly setting it up in the corner here, because it still leaves lots of space for another robot to be able to drive in here. And what it does is it also holds onto that robot so that when the robot's sitting on top, it actually makes that robot itself more stable. So this is a couple linear rails that they'd be able to drive up on. It'd be nice to be able to take a closer look and see how it is exactly they're driving those. I believe they're driving them with a couple servos right now, so they probably have a pretty light robot. But it's a pretty quick way of lifting a robot up. The reason that I say that I think lifting robots up and above over another robot is likely going to be the way that more teams are more likely to get 2 bases is that I honestly haven't seen that many kickstand robots kicking up this season. And because there haven't been that many kickstand robots, you really do need another robot that has a kickstand that's going to make it less likely to be able to come into this. Whereas on this one, a lot of teams are not using that full 18-inch height box requirement. And this might be more likely, in my opinion, to fit with more robots and have more adaptability. When it comes to the playoffs and you might be able to pick teams, having more adaptability, I think, is a really big deal. So this is another creative way of doing this. I've seen this with some rack and pinions as being quite successful. I've seen this with linear slides being quite successful. And I do have a video coming out next week on a new piece from Offset Robotics about how you might also do this with some box tube slides as well. Last up here, we've got a couple different autonomouses. We've got a 12-ball autonomous from 23250 Verge Robotics. And I want to show this off because, one, I want teams to recognize just how well robots can perform on a wooden drivetrain or a wooden chassis as well. They clearly have some aluminum plates inside running this, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with having wooden materials, 6mm, 8mm wood materials on the side of that chassis. And not only is it a non-conductive surface, which means that you're going to be less likely to run into electrostatic discharge or differential static discharge events by running into the robot, but they can be quite resilient, especially if you set it up in a way that's easy to swap around if you do get hit really hard. But they can be quite resilient, and they're quite a good material for building a robot out of. It's lightweight and it's pretty strong. And last up here, we're going to take a look at a world record autonomous from Team Quality Control and Turtle Walkers. This is the Blue Alliance 19745, I believe, is Turtle Walkers, and 21229 is Quality Control. So let's take a look at this. This is from a qualifier on the Washington Tech Invitational. I want you to take a look at how Quality Control is setting up here. And I think this is definitely a meta route that teams are starting to go along, is that the first robot here is focusing on opening up the gate, as well as collecting a few more artifacts near the front as they open up the gate as they can. And then the second robot in the back left-hand corner is focusing on firing in the edge. And at the very end of their autonomous, they also make sure that the robots get off of that launch line so they're not missing out on those key 6 points. So I think this ends up being a 79 or 96 point autonomous once you factor in all of the artifacts as well. And like I was saying earlier at the start here, let's take a look at what it is their motif is. It is purple, green, purple. And this is like I was saying up at the start here. It may not be important whether you actually focus on those artifact points or not in that motif, because just getting more points may push you up and over the edge in that qualifying rank points in total. So we're going to watch through until they get to the end of their record here, and we'll see what in the last 7 seconds, because they're clearly still able to fill up the section here. And if it is purple, green, purple, they have 1, 2, and then 3, 4, and then they have 7 out of 9 total just based off of random chance. It's possible that this last one, purple, green, purple, was actually indexed by one of the teams. However, just based off of random chance, perhaps not those last 3, they would have gotten 6 out of 9, which is still really impressive when it comes to that artifact score, and likely to get them that artifact ranking point, provided that they can manually get those points in as well. But even with that random chance, just getting in more throughput is really critical. And taking a look at their pathing here, I think that the robot here may have, Quality Control may have some sort of camera vision to recognize when they have 3 balls inside of the robot or not. Sorry, 3 artifacts inside or not. I'm not sure, but it does look like it does this little kind of double check or double bounce. I'm not sure if that is just a manually programmed path or not, or they're going to have to watch that artifact there, because if the artifact disturbs those spike markers, I believe that is a penalty. So they're going to have to watch that one. But when you take a look at the pathing of the turtle walkers in the front here, what they are doing, and let's punch back to the start here. So they are firing off their original preloads, grabbing another 3, firing off those other 3, and then coming in again and opening up the gate. And I believe at this point, they now just continuously cycle, open up that gate, wait there for the artifacts to come in while that gate is opening up, and then cycle in again. I think that's a really slick, really intelligent way of making sure that they're picking up artifacts. It also looks like they have some sort of system to keep track of, do they actually have 3 artifacts inside their robot as well? So really good synergy from both of these teams working together. Super impressive. Autonomous getting 28 artifacts through that goal right away. They should be really proud of themselves. And I think the teams have a lot to learn from in looking at this autonomous pathing. Last thing I want to say, watch out Team 23849 here. There is an artifact that comes through and ends up contacting another robot on the opposing team. I believe that is a minor foul as well. So that's 5 points for the other team. Because of that. I think this has happened a couple different times to them throughout the match as well. Another thing I'll say, if you look at Team Turtle Walkers here, they're flying awfully close to the sun, being right along this middle line here. We can see that as they stop and accelerate, they're very close to that middle line, and a ref may call them if they were to tap another robot over that midline. They may want to set their shooting point just a little bit closer to that goal as well. If you've got some interesting matches or robots that you think community would benefit from, you can submit it in the FTC Fridays submission form down below. If you'd like access to some more robotics resources, CADs, code snippets, and other tutorials that I've done, you consider joining the community down below as well. And as always, best of luck out there this FTC season.